Hey guys, how is it going? And welcome back to another episode of Cloud Engineering Projects. And in today's episode, I will be talking about different ways you can operate or manage the cloud. So this is a very important topic because a lot of people, especially beginners, often get confused about these things. So if you are a cloud engineer, a cloud engineering aspirant, or overall you are a very passionate cloud person just like myself, then this video is right for you. In this video, not only will I be doubling down on all the tools and ways, and in fact, methods you can use to operate the cloud, I will also be telling the best client or tool to use depending on the task that you wish to do. So let's quickly get to it. In this video, the structure we will follow is this. We will firstly start with Azure, then we will move to AWS and then to GCP, which is Google Cloud Platform. But before we get started, let's quickly talk about what a client is. A client is basically any tool, app, or an interface that you use to interact with cloud services. Think of a client as something that sits between a cloud engineer and the cloud resources. This is in fact the best way to think about it because without the clients, a cloud engineer will not necessarily be able to manage or operate on the cloud services. Okay? In your cloud engineering life, you will be required to do a lot of different things. This means that you will be needing to operate or interact with cloud services using different clients. So if client is something that sits between a cloud engineer and cloud services, obviously you will be needing different clients to operate or to do different tasks. So these clients can be a bit confusing and you might not immediately know when to choose which. So in this video, I will be listing some of the most popular clients and also explain their best use situation. So let's get started. I'm going to be starting with Azure Portal. So Azure Portal is a graphical user interface that allows you to click around the Azure interface to use and manage Azure resources. You will use Azure Portal when you want to easily see the resources that you are working with, okay? And especially when you are not doing a repetitive task. For example, if you have a task to quickly see the total space that has been consumed on a database, you will most likely be using Azure Portal to do that because obviously you just want to see the capacity of a database that's been used. So there's no need to write any code, any command to do this. So in this case, when you're not performing any repetitive task, when you just want to see something, right, your best option to use will be the Azure Portal. So if you need to see the graphics of what you are doing, right, then you'll be using Azure Portal. Then the next client is the AZCLI, which is basically Azure CLI. As the name implies, AZCLI is the Azure Command Line Interface client that allows you to use set of AZ commandlets, which is Azure commandlets, to manage Azure resources. So you will use this Azure CLI for scripting and automation. It is also best used if you are doing a repetitive task. So example in this case would be something that happens every week, every day, every time, or in fact every 2 months or so. The idea is that you will use this when you want to manage resources automatically. So another client is PowerShell. PowerShell is in itself a very powerful object-oriented scripting language. I particularly love using this because of its object-oriented capability. It is a scripting language that was designed with the mindset of a programming language. With PowerShell, you can define a class, you can define an object, and many other capabilities of a programming language using PowerShell. Myself and a lot of other people would like to see PowerShell as a programming language because of its robust capabilities. You will see PowerShell as a very popular tool around Microsoft's ecosystem. And PowerShell is so interesting because it is easy to learn and use. right? So if you are working in a Microsoft-dominated work environment, you are most likely going to be using PowerShell as your scripting language, right? Because of how it flexibly integrates with Microsoft technologies. So if you are working in a Microsoft environment where your company uses a lot of Microsoft tools, you are most likely going to be going for PowerShell anytime you want to interact with Azure resources. Okay, PowerShell, like the AZ has its own set of commandlets that is completely different from the AZ Another client that I would like to mention is Azure SDK, which is Azure Software Development Kit. Azure SDKs are collections of libraries built to make it easier to develop applications that use Azure services. So imagine you are a software developer now, and you want to build a mobile application that uses Azure services. Say, for example, you are building an application that collects data from different sources and put it in the cloud. Obviously, you'll be using storage accounts, right? So in that case, you are most likely going to be using Azure SDK. And there are quite a lot of different Azure SDKs that are compatible with different programming languages. So if you are building your own application using Python, you'll be using Azure SDK Python. If you are using .NET, you'll be using the SDK for .NET. If you are using Go, if you are using Java, you'll be using the SDK that is compatible with the programming language that you are using, right? So this is a very, very robust client that helps developer to quickly build software that can easily integrate with Azure services. Okay. Then the next client is the Azure Cloud Shell. This is a very interesting one because it does not have its own set of commandlets, unlike AZCLI and PowerShell. It is just a browser-based command line interface. So when you open this from the browser, you can choose to either use PowerShell commandlets or AZCLI commandlets. Then another very powerful client that we have is the Azure REST API. The Azure REST API is for managing Azure resources. It provides a programmatic access to Azure services, allowing you to interact with and manage Azure resources using HTTP requests, right? This is very useful when you want to use other clients like Postman to query resources within Azure. So this supports set of HTTP operations which provide a create, retrieve, update, or delete access to Azure services. Okay, these that I've mentioned are very popular clients that you use to manage Azure resources depending on your use case. Okay, so having discussed about Azure, let's quickly switch to AWS to see what clients are available within AWS to manage AWS resources. The first one here, just as Azure, we have the AWS Management Console. This is a graphical user interface like the Azure Portal that allows you to click around the AWS interface to use and manage AWS resources. Okay, you will use this when you want to easily see the resources that you are working with. Then the next client that we have is the AWS CLI. This is the same as the AZ CLI, but for AWS, right? And as the name implies, this allows you to use a set of AWS commandlets to manage your AWS cloud resources, right? You will normally use these for scripting and automation. So if you want to do a repetitive task, you don't want to spend time to do a repetitive task. So this is another situation where you will be using AWS CLI, right? Then we have the AWS SDK, which is the AWS Software Development Kit. This is also the same thing as the Azure SDK, but for AWS. At this stage, you are starting to see that all these cloud providers are technically the same thing under the hood, right? But with different terminologies. So AWS Software Development Kit is a compilation of tools, right? Amazon has helped developers and cloud engineers to bring together different tools that will help them to manage AWS resources. They've now packaged all these tools and libraries and a lot of things together and offering it out as a software development kit. Then we have the AWS Cloud Shell. Again, this is similar to the Azure Cloud Shell. It is basically an in-browser CLI terminal. This means that you can access it from the browser. Another client for AWS is the AWS tools for PowerShell. So within PowerShell, you can get AWS tools to use to manage AWS cloud resources. Okay? So Amazon offers this set of commands that is workable with PowerShell, right? Because PowerShell is originally owned by Microsoft, and it has a very, very robust ecosystem of cloud engineers, cloud administrators, and software engineers. So this is really a large client for PowerShell lovers, right? Then another one is the AWS CloudFormation. AWS CloudFormation is a service that lets you define and deploy AWS resources using infrastructure as code templates, making it a lot easier to automate and manage your infrastructure securely and consistently. Okay? So having discussed about Azure clients and AWS clients, let's quickly also touch upon GCP, Google Cloud Platform. The first one is the Google Cloud Console, which is the web UI that you can use to manage your cloud resources within the GCP environment. Okay? So it is very similar to Azure Portal and AWS Management Console, but now for Google Cloud Platform. Then we have the G Cloud, which is the command line interface, which is again very similar to the AZ CLI and the AWS CLI. Then we have the Google Client Libraries for various programming languages. You can imagine this as the SDK too, right? That you can leverage on to quickly develop software that are using Google Cloud Platform services. Then we have the Google Cloud Shell. Again, another browser-based terminal that helps you to quickly use commands to manage the Google Cloud Platform cloud resources without needing to do any setup whatsoever, right? Then Google is very, very, very clever, and then they offer a Cloud SDK Docker image. This is a very, very, very clever client from Google because it is a Docker image that allows you to run G-Cloud commands from the Docker container. This is really amazing from Google because you don't have to install anything. You don't have to travel around with anything. You just need to spring up a Docker container and then start using the commandlets within this Docker container. Then we have the Google Cloud SDK, which is basically for Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. So Google exposed the GCP cloud services as API through the Google Cloud API. So this can also be used to manage resources programmatically. This is also very, very similar to the Azure REST API. Okay? So that's it, guys. That's it for this tutorial. Thank you very much for joining me on this episode of Cloud Engineering Projects. And if you like this video, please give me a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel and turn on the notification to be among the first people that will get notified when I drop videos like this.